This video is about my 3.29 league start plans, and I'm going to be talking specifically about Molten Burst on the Reliquarian. There's been a lot of talk on Reddit and on the internet about how this is not going to be good, but I have been coming up with some ideas for how this could work, and this will, on my build, actually be the primary damage component of my build, and I'm going to synergize my build with Molten Strike because Molten Burst and Molten Strike are quite similar in how they work. So just doing a quick look at some of the things that I considered when I was building this. I'm looking here, and the assumption is based on that the cooldown will not change in 3.29 from this 0.15 second cooldown, and that the base damage and effectiveness of added damage will be at least this at level 20, because the Reliquarian version is level 20, not level 16, as this is here. The weapon version came with a level 16 Molten Burst, with a 20% chance to trigger the skill on melee hit. So that's really the big thing that I think makes up for the inability to socket support gems into the weapon to support Molten Burst, is that you're going to be getting 5 times as many triggers on your Molten Burst as you would if you were using the weapon version. Now, I'm not comparing this to the weapon version because the weapon version is not really that strong to begin with, but I think what is important to think about is how you can take advantage of all of these projectiles that are not getting they're not getting a less damage multiplier on it from like Molten Strike. So let me just go in game and show you. So here, projectiles deal 60% less damage with hits and ailments. This was previously 50. It got nerfed to 60, but you can get it back to 50 with quality, 20 quality. And then this League 3.29, because of the 10% quality that we can get from putting this in a red socket, we can expect that that's actually a slight buff on projectile damage, where we'll be getting 45% less damage on our projectiles from Molten Strike. But let me cut through that and get back on track with the Molten Burst, because that's the main thing that I'm building around. And the way I'm doing that at this point is to use Grellwood Shank, which is a kind of mediocre sword usually, but the 2 global additional projectiles per sword is what I'm expecting through some testing that I did to turn this into Fire's 7 additional projectiles, all at 100% of their damage value. And that would be based on the attack damage or effectiveness of attack damage that I'm hoping will be closer to maybe 200% at the level 20. And if that's the case, this is looking pretty strong. And then just to go through my full build plan for Reliquarian, you get, for those who don't know, you can either go for 1, 2, 3, or you can go 1, 2, 3. You get 3 Ascendancy nodes, and then you get these 5 additional passive points on the Reliquarian. So for my third choice, this will be the 4th lab that I'll have to do. I'm planning to go Melding of the Flesh for this one, a defensive node to help my build get to 90 max all elemental resistance. For this one, obviously, I'm going to go the Ngamahu's Flame for the level 20 Molten Burst, and the Fire Pen, which I think is going to be very helpful. And then for the first one here, at this point, I'm leaning towards the defensive route, the Dawnbreaker. I was thinking about originally the Vol Caress, but based on my calculations, I don't really need. Well, let me back up, because the Onslaught can help certain builds get to the attack speed that we want for this build, but just, I think it makes sense for my build to go 2 defensive nodes, 1 offensive, and just try to go rely on the Molten Burst and scale around that only. So that's the option. Yeah, there are some other ways to build this. Kalm's Roots could have been an option. The Vol Caress could have been an option. Even Elevore, I think, could have worked. This could life stacking. I guess there could be a build that somebody more creative than me would come up with. All right. So let me go in game real quick, and I'm just going to show you guys a couple of components of what the build I'm thinking looks like. This is a passive tree built out on the Juggernaut. I did the Juggernaut as the test so I can get the attack speed simulated that I would need to hit my breakpoint of 6 attacks per second. So as you can see on the Grellwood Shank, it has pretty decent base attack speed. 1.79 on this one, 1.8. This is without a corruption. This is as high as you can get. 20% increased attack speed would be the 1.8. I don't have it here, but ideally I would dual wield the 1.8s, and I don't think that I would get an attack speed implicit corruption because I want to, I think, at least initially use precise technique in this build and be non-crit. So I'm not sure if I'm going to try to do a crit build down the road, but that's to be determined. Now, one of the great things that this build will benefit from, it is a more of an end game probably item that I won't expect to have early in the league, but Nimbus I think will fit very nicely into this build, assuming that the Molten Burst projectiles can return. So really can get some really great value, double dipping basically, returning projectiles from Molten Strike and returning projectiles from Molten Burst. So that's really awesome. Now, Mage Blood here, this is actually not part of my build plan. I just did it here for the convenience of moving around and the move speed. When I did my gameplay testing of this, as you can see, I had 3 empty slots. I was just using it for the movement speed alone. So ignore the Mage Blood that I'm using here. This was just for testing. I'm actually leaning towards using Arn's Anguish for the triple damage, along with a Ralakesh Endurance Charge boot for the permanent Endurance Charge uptime. Okay, so just let me talk a little bit more about how we're going to get a lot of damage out of this. As many of us know from playing Molten Strike in the past, projectile speed can be very helpful for your single target damage. It can obviously hurt your clearing ability because the projectiles are more grouped up, but when you have multiple strike skills targeting additional enemies, I don't seem to see this as much of a problem, and I would rather have the single target damage. So what I'm leaning towards, I pathed over here to get the less projectile speed and the reduced projectile speed from this, and yeah, even more reduced projectile speed. That's on top of using slower projectile support, and all of that should be slowing down. So this will apply to the Molten Strike. I don't expect that this will apply to the Molten Burst. I don't think it will, but these should affect the Molten Burst as well, being from the passive tree. The other thing here, concentrated effect support on Molten Strike. Arguably, less area of effect can be a good thing for particularly single target, and I think that that's the route that I want to go in for, because I want this build to be able to take down tanky, bestiary, rare monsters, red monsters and stuff like that. That's kind of what I'm leaning towards. And as you can see here in my testing, I was swapping between Fire Pen and life gain on hit just to kind of simulate what that would feel like in real gameplay. This is a modest life gain on hit. With the Vitality Watcher's Eye, you can obviously get up to 30 life gain per hit, which would be even stronger than what you saw in the gameplay footage that I just put here. And then the Fire Pen, 23 Fire Pen, I kind of tried to show what the difference in single target damage is when you have 20 Fire Pen versus no without 20 fire pen to kind of show what the ascendancy point will actually give us. The built-in 20 fire pen. So let me go back in game here. Now, this is not an optimized tree probably, but it's something that I'm working with. I'm getting Fortify from here. In theory, you could probably get Fortify in a Corruption Implicit. That, you know, I've taken Covered in Ash here. I'm not sure that this is going to be my final way to get it. I may look into other ways to get Covered in Ash into the build. Just for the testing, I went with this Sword Mastery here to get extra strike range. But what I would probably do, I guess you can see here, the Anoint on my amulet is useless for this build. It doesn't really, it doesn't do anything for my build except for max mana and strength intelligence. But I would put on here potentially the Scions. I'll show what I'm talking about. Scion's Ambition. Strike skills target enemies can do so from 40% further away. This is really awesome for Molten Strike, for kind of like quality of life, and I think also defensively, like safety, keeping your distance from the enemies that you have to fight. This is actually really awesome and can help you clear a ton. So that's a really strong option. If you don't need to go, like say Charisma for fitting in extra auras, I'm not sure how much pressure I'm going to have on my mana reservation yet in this build. I'm planning to use Anger and Purity of Elements in the early game for the elemental element immunity. Late game, I might look to use Purity of Fire as my solution to get the max fire res more easily, to hit 90 max elemental resistance. And at that point, I'm not sure if I would try to fit 3 auras in or just stick with 2. Determination may also be fit in. So one of the things, as you can see on the melding of the flesh, it doesn't have the, like the jewel has the minus resistance, so it's like minus 70 to fire, lightning, and cold resistance normally on melding in the flesh. The ascendancy point is stronger than the jewel, where it doesn't have that, but it does take 5 all max LE res off, and basically I'm just canceling that out by playing a brass dome build, which obviously it hurts my life pool, but it makes me immune to critical strike extra damage, which can be very strong and make this build quite tanky. And it comes with a good chunk of flat armor on it, so like I'm gonna aim for maybe like a 5,000 armor brass dome that will get increased by the Grellwood Shank global modifiers, 80% increased armor while stationary times 2. That is a good chunk of armor just from this alone right here. So I think that that's a good starting point to have, you know, solid armor. We're going to be stacking endurance charges, and we're also going to have 90 max all res. We're going to look to get chaos resistance on amethyst rings, and then suffixes on helmet, boots, gloves, potentially amulet as well. Actually, well, chaos, if I use Reliquarian, that will have chaos res, and Orange Anguish would be the complement to the Reliquarian, and that's where we get the endurance charges from. I'm kind of right now pathing down here. I don't know if, you know, you could actually probably cut this whole strip out, because it may not actually add that much value to the build, but that's still being determined right now. You could take this all out and throw a cluster jewel in up here, for example, and that may be more efficient. Like this node right here, I don't know if I need this. When you're playing something with, let me just show you what my test build has. 6.58 attacks per second. Okay, this is a very important number for this build concept, because it's number 1 above the 6 attacks per second. And I'm going to bring over my notepad now at this point. Okay. So Molten Burst with the 0.15 second cooldown can fit in 6.66 Molten Bursts per second. But let's take that out. It's really just 6 Molten Bursts that you can squeeze in because you can't fit a whole 7th Molten Burst into per second. So in order to accomplish the breakpoint of 6 Molten Bursts per second, we need our attacks per second to be between 6 and 6.66 attacks per second. It can't be more than this, or else you're going to be cutting off one of your attacks per second potentially, or you will do that. If you go to, like, say, 7 attacks per second on your attack speed here, if this were 7 attacks per second, I'm going to be losing damage potentially from my Molten Burst, which I don't want to do. So basically the purpose of my test here on this Juggernaut was to find out how much attack speed do you need in total to hit within 6 and 6.66. And as you can see here, the summarized version, I added everything up on my passive tree and all of my gear, and I have 132% increased attack speed. I get 10% more attack speed from the dual wield bonus, and then this factors in multi-strike being used for 44% more melee attack speed. Now, if you go ahead and use greater multi-strike support, which gives 50% more attack speed, that's going to mean that you need less increased attack speed. So depending on what you choose to use, and if you want to be locked in for 3 repeats on your strike skill, that can change the ways that you get to this attack speed breakpoint. Now, for this build in particular, I am expecting that I'm going to have the 10% more attack speed from dual wield bonus, because I want to go all in on projectiles and get the +4 projectiles that will apply both to the Molten Strike and to the Molten Burst. And one thing that's important when we look at Growwood Shank, though, is that the base damage of Growwood Shank is not that high. So when you convert it to fire, 251 on the top end, that's not a whole lot of damage. So we need to get flat sources of flat fire damage from somewhere, or physical damage that would be converted. But my plan is to do fire damage, and the way to do that, I think, is through anger, and there is the glove modifier from the temple that gives you a pretty good amount of flat fire damage. I think it's against burning enemies, I believe. So that is going to be one of my goals for this build, is to get those gloves. And then in addition to that, so instead of this rare ring here, I could, if they become available in this league and are affordable, look for a precursor ring with +1 max endurance charge, and then flat fire per endurance charge. That's kind of I've kind of done previous builds with that ring, and it is pretty powerful. Like, when you have 10 endurance charges times like 32 flat fire or something, that's 320 flat fire, which is more powerful than the anger aura alone. So those are a few ways that I plan to get flat fire damage that I don't have here. And when you see the gameplay footage, this is basically without any flat fire damage accounted for. And when you think about that, I don't really know what to expect in terms of gameplay, but when you have 6 attacks per second times 7 projectiles on the Molten Burst, that's 42 projectiles per... Hang on a second. 42 projectiles per second for Molten Burst, okay? 42 projectiles times, say you have 500 flat damage. Let's see. That's like 21,000 base, fire damage that you're doing, and then that gets multiplied by all of your increases to, fire damage and projectile damage and stuff. So, that seems like a pretty promising number. This is, of course, assuming that all of the projectiles hit on single target, which they probably won't, even with my slow projectiles. But I'm just doing this for the calculations, and Molten Strike is kind of notorious for being difficult to calculate true DPS on with all the projectiles, because it's kind of random where they will land. So even if you try this build out and you're seeing pretty disappointing numbers in POB and also tooltip especially, tooltip I think is just melee damage, not even projectile damage, according to like the wiki. I would not be discouraged by that. You still could be doing very good damage on a build like this. So that is really most of the build. As you can see, I'll just show you maybe where the attack speed comes from, starting from like the Scion starting point. This is some attack speed that you can grab on the Berserking wheel that I was experimenting with. I got attack speed from this sword wheel with Blade Master. Some attack speed can come from... Okay, I think that might be it on the tree. So attack speed from faster attack support, you can get obviously quality on this for, I guess, 15 more. So that would be, if you have like a 21 faster attack support, I think that's 45 increased attack speed. And then with 15 from quality, that would be 60% increased attack speed. So I'm using this as you see it here. In theory, you can get 16% more increased attack speed just from the faster attack support alone. If you had like a 2120 faster attack support socketed into a green socket in this upcoming league with the changes to socket colors. Then multi-strike. And then I'm getting my attack speed from gloves. Like you see my gloves here. I probably wouldn't use the Searing Exarch implicit for attack speed. I would get it as a suffix for like 16% increased attack speed, and which would be twice this much attack speed, and I would use the Searing Exarch implicit for the additional non-vol strike skill targets an additional nearby enemy. So now Nimbus, when we don't have that in the early game, we can use returning projectiles. That may mathematically work out better than other support gems. If we're going to do that, I would probably maybe drop Conch Effect, maybe we'd go... I think that might be the best one to drop here. I think that slower projectiles has a better, bigger impact on single target damage than concentrated effect. Through my testing, I didn't really do any measurements, but just based on feel, I think that slower projectiles is the better one to keep in, and I would swap out Conch Effect. But tell me if you think differently based on your testing and experience, and that may help my build out as well. As you can see through my play test, I had no jewels socketed. I would probably plan to use one base jewel rare for mana gain on hit, and life gain on hit would come from Vitality Watcher's Eye. So rare base jewel, Watcher's Eye, and then these two I would use for maybe a Flesh and Flame from the Ascendant. So a couple good options I think are Juggernaut to help hit the precise technique accuracy requirements, and since we're stacking some endurance charges, we're going to get some extra endurance charge, and this would be our way to generate the brutal charges later in the game. Until we have this, because Flesh and Flames are not really early league items, You can just use Inexorable for gaining an endurance charge when hit. Inexorable, I don't know. The other option to consider, and this would affect your increased attack speed, so be careful with it, adding in Tailwind. 8% increased action speed is going to really help you hit that 6 attacks per second. And this gives also an extra projectile, and the mark effect helps as well because we want to use Sniper's Mark with Mark on hit most likely. That's my plan. You may have a different idea. So I think that either of these would work for this build, and historically my research shows that the Ascendant Flesh and Flames are not that expensive. We don't know how they're going to be now that there's 3 Ascendants. Like Luminary is going to be very popular, so we can imagine that people are going to be going for maybe some of these nodes on Flesh and Flame, but hopefully people don't view these as worth using 2 jewel slots for, and they remain pretty affordable. I'm sharing this with you guys just because I don't think, not that many people are going to be playing this. It shouldn't affect the market. I don't think I'm, messing up my build and economy. And I don't think that that's, a concern of mine really. I want to share it with my community, and I hope that somebody out there, will actually have fun. And, if this is a knockout build that people, heard about it from me, and, that's, kind of why I'm making these videos. So, so that's the plan for the build. Now, once again, if you're not going to use Molten Strike, say you want to just use Molten Burst for your build, you still would want to aim for this breakpoint here, the 6 to 6.66 attacks per second, so that you're getting your full 6 Molten Burst per second. So say you're using Cyclone, for example, I could imagine some people trying to use Cyclone with this. You still want to get your attacks per second into that range. And as you saw here, 6.58 attacks per second, that's pretty much the sweet spot, maybe like 6.5. Like if you get down to like right on 6.0, that means that you need to be basically stationary and attacking repeatedly to make sure that you hit the 6 attacks per second. If you have 6.5 attacks per second, that means that you can maybe squeeze in a little bit of repositioning and still get your 6 attacks per second, if that makes sense. So let me just do a quick showcase here just to show you guys, like, here live, now that we've talked about the build, what this is going to look like. There's a little delay, but you can see that the Molten Shell or Molten Strike balls are not really moving very far. They're kind of bouncing up and down on the repeat as well. So clearly the conch effect, let me go ahead and take conch effect out and we'll see what that looks like. Yeah, the spread's starting to definitely increase without the conch effect. Now, let's compare it to slow projectiles. Yeah, the spread's still pretty wide with just one. I think you need both to really... Yeah, you see how tight that hitbox is there when you have both? Like all of those just landed on that rare right there, basically. I say all, but like most of them. So here you can see the coverage I'm getting, and this is just with, I don't even have the implicit here. I just have 2 strike skills right now. So that was pretty solid. One important thing to note, if you didn't notice it, the projectiles you only get the 4 extra projectiles if you've been hit recently. So you definitely want to play like an armor build, not an evasion build, when you're doing this, because if you're evading all the hits, then you're going to not get the projectiles consistently. So I think that's kind of like a forced thing that you're going to have to do. Yeah, that's the build. I'm going to end it here to try not to make this too long, but I think I've kind of shown you guys the build concept, roughly, and I hope that maybe this inspired some people to maybe come up with something similar or try this out. If you guys like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel, because I do like to put out things like this, and this is just one of the many ideas that I have in a new league start. And as you can see, I don't just follow along with what the nerfs and the buffs are. I kind of stick to like whatever I think is interesting, and so this is a good way to get build ideas that are not just like the meta spell skills for 3.29. That's kind of like what my channel can occasionally be good for. So thanks for watching, and I will give some updates later in the league, assuming this gets off the ground. And if not, if this fails for some reason, then I will share what my next plans will be for a mid-league pivot. All right, see you guys in the next one.